Deep within the ancient forest of the Pacific Northwest, where sunlight filters through towering evergreens like golden dust, a woman named Eleanor huddled beneath a makeshift shelter of pine branches. 3 days since she'd lost her way, her supplies dwindled to nothing more than half a granola bar and an empty water bottle. The wilderness had claimed many before her. The forest didn't discriminate between those who entered by choice and those who had nowhere else to go. As darkness descended, bringing with it the chorus of nocturnal creatures, something massive moved between the shadows. Not bear, not wolf, something that walked upright yet moved with primal grace. Eleanor froze as two luminous eyes found hers across the clearing. What if the legends whispered around campfires held more truth than fiction? Could this encounter become her salvation rather than her doom? Eleanor held her breath, muscles tensed to run despite knowing she lacked the strength for flight. The massive figure emerged from the tree line, silhouetted against the waning light. 8 feet tall, perhaps more, covered in dense russet fur with shoulders broad as an ox. The creature moved with surprising grace for its size, each step deliberate, cautious. "Stay back," Eleanor whispered, voice quavering as she pressed herself against the rough bark of a cedar. Her hand clutched a sharp stone, a pitiful weapon against such mass. The creature stopped, regarding her with eyes that reflected amber in the dusk. Not animal eyes, too knowing, too contemplative. It crouched, reducing its intimidating height, and extended a massive hand, not to grab her, but offering something: food. Berries and what appeared to be strips of dried meat in a crude pouch of woven grass. Eleanor's stomach clenched painfully, a reminder of 3 days without sustenance. The creature placed the pouch on the ground and retreated several steps, watching her with what could only be described as patience. Minutes passed in silence, before hunger overcame fear. Eleanor darted forward, snatched the pouch, and scrambled back to her position. The berries were sweet, the meat gamey but satisfying. As she ate, the creature produced something from behind its back, a crude wooden flute, handcrafted from river cave. The melody that followed was simple but haunting. No animal could create such intentional music. Eleanor's fear began transforming into wary curiosity. When the song ended, the creature gestured toward the deeper forest and made guttural sounds that seemed almost like speech. Seeing her incomprehension, it tried again, mixing sounds with elaborate gestures. Through this primitive charade, understanding gradually formed. Shelter, safety, following. Eleanor shook her head. I don't understand what you want." The creature considered this impasse, then scratched in the dirt with one thick finger. Simple drawings appeared. A cave, small figures inside, then another drawing of smaller creatures that looked like the big one. "You have family, children?" Eleanor asked incredulously. The creature nodded, a distinctly human gesture, and added to the drawing a larger figure, with smaller ones, but with a space beside them, an absence. It pointed to Eleanor, then to the empty space in the drawing. "You want me to come with you, to your family?" Another nod, more vigorous. "Why would you trust me? Why would I trust you?" Eleanor's laugh held no humor. "I must be hallucinating from hunger." The creature's response was to motion again toward the forest depths, then mime eating and sleeping. Basic needs that Eleanor couldn't meet alone. Winter approached. She had felt it in the biting morning air. Without shelter, without food. It picked up a stick and added more to its dirt, drawing clouds, rain, snow, and a small human figure lying still beneath them. The message was clear: come or die when winter arrives. Eleanor weighed her options, which were painfully few. Return to civilization where she had no home, no job, no one who cared whether she lived or died, or follow this impossible creature into the unknown. "If you wanted to hurt me, you could have already," she reasoned aloud, "and I have nowhere else to go." The creature extended its hand again, not grabbing, just offering, An invitation, not a demand. Eleanor took a deep breath and placed her much smaller hand in its massive palm. The fur was coarse, but the touch gentle. As they moved deeper into the forest, the creature occasionally produced the wooden flute, playing brief melodies. Eleanor noticed how the forest seemed to quiet around the music, as if the very trees were listening. The deeper they traveled, the more Eleanor questioned her decision, yet some instinct told her this bizarre encounter might be her salvation rather than her doom. "I must be crazy," she whispered to herself, completely, utterly mad. But as darkness fully claimed the forest, following this gentle giant seemed infinitely preferable to facing the wilderness alone. The journey through the darkening forest lasted over an hour. Eleanor stumbled often, her city-bred instincts no match for navigating the uneven terrain in twilight. Each time she faltered, a massive, steady hand would appear to stabilize her, firm yet surprisingly gentle. They arrived at what appeared to be a sheer rock face, unremarkable save for a curtain of ivy. The creature pushed aside the vines, revealing a narrow fissure that would have been impossible to spot without guidance. It gestured for Eleanor to enter. "You want me to go in there?" she asked, peering into the darkness. "I can't see anything." The creature made a low rumbling sound that might have been encouragement, then gently propelled her forward with a light touch between her shoulder blades. The passage was tight at first, forcing Eleanor to turn sideways. She fought rising panic in the pitch-black confines until, quite suddenly, the passage widened. Ambient light filtered from somewhere above, revealing a space that defied all expectations. Not a primitive cave, but a sophisticated dwelling. The large central chamber had been carefully enlarged and shaped, with smoothed walls and a high ceiling where natural shafts allowed daylight and ventilation. Several smaller chambers branched off, their entrances covered with woven reed screens. The floors were lined with soft pine boughs and animal hides. A small, carefully vented fire pit dominated the center, currently unlit but well constructed. "This is remarkable," Eleanor whispered. Movement from one of the side chambers drew her attention. Two smaller versions of the creature emerged, perhaps reaching Eleanor's shoulder in height. Cubs. There was no better word for them. They hung back, studying the human with wide, cautious eyes. The larger creature, their father, Eleanor now understood, made a series of gentle vocalizations that seemed to reassure them. The smaller of the two crept forward with hesitant curiosity, while the larger cub maintained a wary distance. "Hello," Eleanor said softly, crouching to appear less threatening. The father moved to a crude shelf, carved into the rock wall, and returned with something Eleanor hadn't expected: a stack of weathered newspaper clippings. He pressed them into her hands with surprising urgency. Eleanor gasped as she recognized her own face, staring back from the yellowed paper. "Local woman missing, presumed dead," read one headline. Others detailed the abandoned search efforts after weeks without leads. "You've been watching me," she realized aloud. "You knew who I was before you approached." The creature nodded, then surprised her by speaking, not in grunts or growls, but actual words, though heavily accented and limited. "Eleanor," it said with obvious effort. "Need help?" She stared, speechless at this revelation. "Cubs need mother." The words were halting, but unmistakable. "You can speak? How is that possible?" "Learn, watch humans. Many years." He tapped his chest. "Coda. That's your name? Coda?" Another nod. He gestured to the smaller cub who had ventured closest. "Ama?" Then to the more distant one. "Tor. What happened to their mother?" Eleanor asked, though she dreaded the answer. Coda's massive shoulders slumped. "Winter, bad storm. Not return." Understanding dawned with terrible clarity. Coda wasn't simply offering shelter in exchange for help with chores. He was proposing something far more profound, that she become a surrogate mother to his children. "I don't know if I can be what they need," Eleanor admitted. I've never been a mother. Coda pointed again to the newspaper clippings, then to his head. No you. Watch long time. Good heart. Alone. We alone. He gestured to encompass them all. Together, survive. The smaller cub, Amma, had edged close enough to touch the fabric of Eleanor's tattered jacket, examining it with solemn fascination. The gesture, so childlike in its innocent curiosity, pierced something within Pauline that had been numb for a very long time. These creatures, this family had chosen her. In a world that had discarded her, they saw value, purpose. I'll try, she whispered, as much to herself as to Coda. I don't know how, but I'll try. Coda kindled the fire with practiced efficiency, striking sparks from flint against steel. Human tools, Eleanor noted. The flames cast dancing shadows across the cave walls, illuminating their strange domestic tableau. Eleanor sat awkwardly on a flattened boulder, covered with animal pelts, unsure of her place in this impossible scenario. The smaller cub, Amma, continued to study her from a cautious distance, while Tor, the older one, remained firmly behind Coda, occasionally shooting suspicious glances her way. Human, eat. Coda offered a wooden bowl containing what appeared to be stewed roots and dried meat. Thank you, Eleanor accepted, surprised by the savory aroma. Her first tentative taste revealed the stew to be palatable, bland by human standards, but nourishing. She ate slowly, conscious of 3 pairs of eyes watching her every move. When she finished, Coda presented her with a deerskin water pouch. The water was cool and clean, likely from an underground spring. These creatures, this family, had mastered surprising levels of comfort in their wilderness dwelling. As the fire crackled, Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the life she'd left behind. The marketing executive position she'd lost during company restructuring, the apartment she couldn't afford without income, the friends who gradually stopped calling, the spiral into depression that left her living in her car, then a shelter, then nowhere at all. Think sad thoughts, Coda observed, interrupting her reverie. Eleanor looked up, startled by his perception. Just remembering. Coda nodded sagely. Past, heavy burden. He tapped his chest. Carry here. The simple wisdom in his words brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. She brushed them away quickly, embarrassed. This prompted Amma to edge closer, curiosity overcoming caution. The young cub reached out one hesitant finger to touch the wetness on Eleanor's cheek, then examined the moisture with solemn fascination. Emma, Coda gently admonished, but Eleanor shook her head. It's okay, she assured him. To Amma, she explained. They're tears. Sometimes humans make them when they feel strong emotions. Emma's eyes widened with interest, and she made a soft chirping sound that might have been a question. I think she's asking if you're sad. Tor spoke, unexpectedly, his English clearer than his father's, though still heavily accented. Eleanor's surprise must have shown on her face, as Coda explained. Cubs learn fast, better than old ones. I'm not sad exactly, Eleanor answered Amma carefully, just adjusting. Coda rose and retrieved something from a niche in the wall, a hand-drawn map on a piece of tanned hide. He spread it before Eleanor, pointing to various markings. Our territory, he explained, tracing a circular area with one thick finger. Safe here. He indicated several areas marked with red symbols. Not safe. Hunters. Traps. The map revealed an intricate understanding of the forest geography, trails, water sources, seasonal food locations, and danger zones, all carefully documented. This wasn't merely survival, it was strategic living. You've created an entire world here, Eleanor marveled. Night deepened. Coda prepared bedding for Eleanor in a small side chamber, a surprisingly comfortable nest of dried grasses covered with soft furs. He showed her a crude but effective latrine area in another chamber and a storage section where food and other necessities were kept. Before retiring, Coda gathered the cubs near the fire. From a woven reed basket, he removed flat stones with crude images painted on them. The three arranged the stones in different patterns, while Coda vocalized a rhythmic, almost sing-song narrative. He's telling stories, Eleanor realized, watching the cub's rapt attention. Bedtime stories. The stones depicted seasonal changes, animals, and what appeared to be their own family history. The story seemed to center on the cub's mother, their earliest memories preserved and reinforced through this nightly ritual. When the story concluded, both cubs turned expectantly toward Eleanor, clearly waiting for something. "They want your story," Coda explained. "My story. All family share stories. How day was." The simple normalcy of the request, so human in its essence, caught Eleanor off guard. As she stumbled through an abbreviated account of her day, carefully edited for young ears, she wondered if she was hallucinating this entire experience. Yet the rough stone wall against her back felt undeniably real. The fire's warmth on her face, the earthy scent of the cave, the curious eyes watching her, all tangible, present. Real or not, it was the first place she'd belonged in a very long time. Eleanor woke to the peculiar sensation of being watched. Opening her eyes, she found Amma crouched at the entrance to her sleeping chamber, observing her with unabashed curiosity. Behind Amma, partially concealed but equally attentive, lurked Tor. "Good morning," Eleanor offered, sitting up slowly to avoid startling them. The cubs exchanged glances, then Amma ventured, "Good morning," the words careful and deliberate. Eleanor couldn't suppress her smile. "Very good." Coda appeared behind his children, carrying something in his massive hands. He nudged the cubs gently aside and entered, presenting Eleanor with his offering, a weathered children's picture book with a faded library stamp on its cover. "Learning," he explained, settling cross-legged on the cave floor. Words. The book was well worn, its corners softened with use, pages dog-eared and smudged by large, careful fingers. "The Big Book of Words," proclaimed the cover, featuring cheerful cartoon animals labeled with their names. "You've been teaching yourself English," Eleanor realized, leafing through the simple book with newfound understanding. "And teaching the cubs." Coda nodded. "Watch humans, many years. Listen, learn words." He tapped his ear. "Good hearing, better than human," Tor added proudly from the doorway. Eleanor patted the furs beside her, inviting the cubs closer. Emma immediately scampered over, while Tor hesitated before taking a position slightly farther away, maintaining his cautious distance. For the next hour, they engaged in a peculiar language exchange. Eleanor would point to objects on the page, pronounce them clearly, then listen as the three repeated the words with varying degrees of success. Coda struggled most with consonant clusters, while Emma had difficulty with certain vowel sounds. Tor, despite his reluctance to engage directly with Eleanor, seemed to possess a natural facility for mimicry. When they exhausted the book's content, Coda suggested they continue the lesson in a more practical manner. He led Eleanor around their cave dwelling, pointing to objects and waiting for her to name them. In turn, he provided the words from his own language, sounds that Eleanor's human vocal apparatus could only approximate. "Fire," she would say. "Morak," Coda would reply, the R a guttural rumble deep in his throat. "Water," Shilka. The cubs joined in enthusiastically, creating a three-way translation game that had Amma giggling a surprisingly musical sound whenever Eleanor mangled their language particularly badly. "Not fault," Coda assured her. "Human mouth, different." By midday, Eleanor had grasped several dozen essential words in their language, and the family had expanded their English vocabulary considerably. The exchange created an unexpected bridge, each small communication victory drawing them incrementally closer. During their midday meal, a surprisingly tasty stew of wild onions, tubers, and smoked fish, Eleanor observed the family's dynamics more clearly. Coda was patient but firm with the cubs, correcting their behavior with quiet vocalizations that needed no translation. Emma, the younger, showed boundless curiosity, tempered by an endearing shyness. Tor, despite his apparent linguistic gifts, maintained an emotional reserve, particularly toward Eleanor. After the meal, Coda retrieved a small leather pouch from which he extracted a handful of smooth river stones painted with simple symbols. He arranged them in patterns, using them to convey more complex concepts that words alone couldn't bridge. Sun path, he explained, creating an arc with the stones. Days getting shorter, he rearranged them into a different pattern. Soon, snow time. Eleanor began to understand the urgency behind Coda's offer. Winter approached, and with it challenges that would be difficult for a single parent of any species to manage alone. "How do you survive the winters?" she asked. Coda's expression grew somber. "Hard time. Stay in cave. Little food. Cubs sleep much." He hesitated before adding, "First winter without mate." The simple statement carried profound weight. Eleanor recognized the grief in his eyes, so human in its depth that it momentarily stole her breath. "I'll help," she promised, surprising herself with her own certainty. "Whatever you need." Amma, sensing the emotional shift, pressed against Eleanor's side. The gesture, so naturally affectionate, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. When she looked up, she caught Tor watching the interaction with an unreadable expression before he quickly averted his gaze. That evening, as Coda taught Eleanor to weave reed baskets by the fire's light, she reflected on the strange new vocabulary she was acquiring, words not just of language, but of belonging. Days merged into a routine that gave Eleanor's life unexpected structure. Mornings began with Coda departing to check traps and gather food, while Eleanor remained with the cubs. She taught them simple games from her childhood, stone-passing rhythms and hand-clapping sequences that delighted Amma. Tor participated reluctantly, if at all, maintaining a palpable distance. On this particular morning, Eleanor attempted to engage Tor by showing him the few possessions she'd carried when Coda found her: a small pocket knife, a metal water bottle, and a broken compass that had proven useless in her wilderness wanderings. "This shows directions," she explained, holding out the compass. "North, south, east, west. It's broken now, but when it worked, the needle would point north." Tor glanced at the object with feigned indifference. "Don't need no directions already. How do you know which way is north without a compass? Stars at night, sun in day, moss on trees." He shrugged as if this knowledge were obvious to anyone with sense. "Human things break, nature always works." The dismissal stung, but Eleanor persisted. "Would you like to hold it anyway, just to see how it's made?" After a moment's hesitation, Tor took the compass, turning it over in his hands with more curiosity than he'd admit. His fingers were surprisingly dexterous, exploring the cracked glass and damaged needle. "It's yours if you want it," Eleanor offered. Tor's head snapped up, suspicion replacing interest. "Why give me things? Don't want human things. It's just a gift, Tor. No reason except to be kind." "Don't need human kindness," he muttered, but tucked the compass into a small pouch tied at his waist. Later that afternoon, while gathering firewood with both cubs, Eleanor noticed Tor repeatedly checking the compass, fascinated despite himself. She smiled, but said nothing, recognizing that drawing attention to his interest would only reinforce his walls. That evening, as they sorted berries by the hearth, Eleanor attempted conversation. "Tor, could you tell me about your mother? If it's not too difficult to talk about." Silence stretched so long she thought he would ignore the question entirely. "She was strong," he finally said, voice tight, "knew everything about forest. Best hunter, best tracker. Made special teas when we were sick." His eyes briefly met Eleanor's before darting away. "She sang at night, different than father's songs." "She sounds wonderful," Eleanor said softly. "Was wonderful," Tor corrected sharply. "Now gone." "I'm very sorry, Tor. I know I never replace." "No," he interrupted, voice rising. "Never replace. Never." He stood abruptly, scattering berries. "You are not mother. Just human, not family." Coda emerged from the storage chamber, alerted by the outburst. "Tor," he rumbled, a warning in his tone. "She tries to be mother," Tor accused, pointing at Eleanor. "Gives gifts, asks about real mother, wants to replace." Eleanor helps family, Coda corrected firmly. Not replace, different. Don't need help, need mother back. Tor's voice broke on the last word, revealing the raw grief beneath his anger. Before Coda could respond, Tor lunged forward and grabbed Eleanor's small leather journal, her most precious remaining possession, from where it lay beside her sleeping furs. Tor, please don't, Eleanor began, rising. With deliberate malice, Tor tore a page from the journal, then another. Human things break, he repeated, echoing his earlier words as he continued destroying the pages. His eyes locked on Eleanor's. Coda's voice thundered through the cave, startling even Eleanor. Enough. The cub froze, torn pages clutched in his fist. In 3 strides, Coda crossed the cave and took the journal from his son's hands, then firmly gripped Tor's shoulder. Their eyes locked in a silent confrontation until Tor's gaze dropped in submission. Disrespect, dishonor, Coda said, each word weighted with disappointment. Not how family behaves. She's not family, Tor whispered, but with less conviction. Eleanor risks much to help us, deserves respect. Coda turned to Eleanor, offering the damaged journal. Tor will gather new leaves for new pages. Will help repair. It's all right, Eleanor said, though the sight of her journal, containing the only photographs she still possessed, and the last birthday note from her grandmother, made her throat tighten. He's grieving. Grief not excuse for cruelty. Coda insisted. To Tor he said, 3 days, no evening stories. Think about choices. That night, as Eleanor carefully salvaged what she could of her journal, she heard soft footsteps approach. Tor stood at the entrance to her chamber, eyes downcast. Father says apologize, he mumbled. Thank you, Tor. He hesitated, then added in a whisper almost too faint to hear, she liked to write in book too, like you. Before Eleanor could respond, he vanished into the shadows. Eleanor sat motionless, understanding at last the true source of his pain. Not that she was different from his mother, but that in some ways she was too similar. Today we learn forest, Coda announced over their morning meal of roasted roots and dried berries. Eleanor needs knowledge for winter. Eleanor nodded, recognizing the practical necessity. The days were growing shorter, the morning air increasingly crisp. Though she'd been with the family for nearly 2 weeks, she remained woefully ignorant about survival beyond their cave dwelling. Coda prepared a small pouch of dried herbs and plants, securing it to a cord around his neck. For healing, he explained, allowing Eleanor to examine the contents. Must know which plants help, which harm. The family set out as dawn light filtered through the canopy. Amar immediately slipped her small hand into Eleanor's, a gesture that had become habitual for the younger cub. Tor walked slightly behind, his demeanor less openly hostile since the journal incident, but still guarded. Their first lesson began in a sunny clearing, where Coda knelt beside various plants, naming each one and explaining its properties. Some were edible, others medicinal, a few dangerously toxic. Eleanor struggled to absorb the wealth of information, trying to memorize distinctive features of each plant. This one, Coda indicated, a nondescript green herb with tiny white flowers, stops bleeding. He broke a stem, showing Eleanor the milky sap. Remember smell. He held it to her nose, a sharp, astringent odor. And this, Eleanor pointed to a cluster of bright berries, death berries. Tor interjected, before his father could answer. Eat 4. Heart stops. Eleanor quickly withdrew her hand. Good to know. They continued through the forest, Coda pointing out hidden food sources that would remain available even in winter. Certain tree barks, roots that could be dug from beneath the snow, sheltered places where hardy fungi grew year-round. Look, Eleanor, Amar tugged at her hand, pointing to a tree where a previous lightning strike had created a hollow cavity. Honey place. In warm seasons, bees make sweet here. You like honey? Eleanor asked, charmed by the cub's enthusiasm. Best food, Amar confirmed solemnly. Better than father's fish. Coda rumbled with what Eleanor now recognized as laughter. truth, nothing better than honey. As they navigated a particularly steep slope, Eleanor struggled with her footing on the uneven terrain. Without comment, Coda moved behind her, his presence steady and reassuring, ready to catch her if she fell. She felt a surge of gratitude for his quiet attentiveness. Near midday, they reached a small stream where Coda demonstrated how to identify fish hiding among rocks and catch them with bare hands, a skill that required patience and stillness Eleanor hadn't yet mastered. Tor, however, displayed impressive proficiency, securing 3 fish in quick succession with minimal splashing. Good technique, Coda praised his son, better than last time. Tor straightened with pride at his father's approval. Then, in a surprising gesture, offered one of the fish to Eleanor. For practice, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Thank you, Eleanor said, accepting the gift for what it was, a tentative olive branch. Under Tor's reluctant instruction, she hewed to clean the fish properly, using the small bone at the gill as a tool to scrape away scales. Her first attempts were clumsy, but by the 3rd fish, she managed a respectable job. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they circled back toward home by a different route, this one taking them through a mature forest of towering evergreens. Here, Coda paused to show Eleanor how various animals related to their kind. He pointed out tracks and explained which creatures avoided them, which were indifferent, and which could pose threats. Forest knows us, he explained, accepts us. Not hunt without need, not take more than share. Balance. Eleanor observed how smaller forest creatures seemed unalarmed by their presence, some barely bothering to move away as they passed. They don't fear you, she noted with surprise. Respect, not fear, Coda corrected. Different. The final lesson came as they crossed a rocky outcrop near their cave. Coda indicated subtle marks carved into certain stones, symbols Eleanor had initially mistaken for natural weathering. Trail marks, he explained, for finding way, for other clans to know territory boundaries. Very old. My grandfather's grandfather made some. Eleanor traced one of the symbols with her finger, marveling at this evidence of culture and history stretching back generations. Your people have been here a very long time. Always been here, Coda confirmed. Will always be. If he hesitated, glancing at his cubs with momentary vulnerability. If survive. The simple statement carried the weight of his responsibility and fear. Eleanor felt the burden of his trust anew. This wasn't merely about her survival anymore, but theirs as well. As they reached the cave entrance, the setting sun cast long shadows across the forest floor. Amma, tired from the day's journey, leaned against Eleanor's side. Without thinking, Eleanor stroked the cub's head gently, a maternal gesture that came with unexpected naturalness. Coda observed this quiet moment, satisfaction evident in his eyes. Morning frost glazed the forest floor, transforming fallen leaves into brittle sculptures that crunched underfoot. Eleanor watched her breath form misty clouds as she helped Coda gather the last autumn berries. Nearly a month had passed since she'd joined the family, and the forest's transformation was unmistakable. Cold comes earlier this year, Coda observed, studying a peculiar stone he kept near the cave entrance. The rock's surface had changed from dull gray to a bluish tint overnight. What's happening to this stone? Eleanor asked, touching its cool surface. Weatherstone, Coda explained. Changes with air moisture, temperature. Blue means snow. Soon. Very soon. Eleanor glanced at the colorful stone with newfound respect. How accurate is it? Never wrong, Tor interjected, emerging from the cave with empty gathering baskets. Great-grandmother found it, special stone from Mountain Heart. The day's task was clear, accelerated preparations for the coming winter. Their previous foraging had been steady, but measured. Now, urgency underscored every movement. Coda distributed assignments quickly. Tor would check the far traps for meat to smoke. Amma would gather specific fungi that grew at the base of old oaks. Eleanor would help Coda harvest and process the remaining root vegetables from a small clearing where he had encouraged their growth throughout the warmer months. Not quite farming, but a deliberate cultivation that surprised her. As they worked, Eleanor noticed birds flying southward in greater numbers. Squirrels scrambled frantically to secure final provisions. Even the quality of light seemed different, sharper, more fleeting, as though the sun itself was conserving energy. "How long will winter last here?" she asked, using a sharpened stick to dig up tubers. Coda gestured to the height of the sun, then swept his arm in an arc. "Sun sleeps long. Snow covers ground until sun returns to middle sky." Eleanor translated his astronomical reference. 4 months? He nodded. "Maybe more. Cave warm, food stored. But must be careful." His expression grew solemn. "Last winter mate went searching when stores ran low. Storm came suddenly. Never found her." The statement hung between them, heavy with implications. Eleanor worked more diligently, understanding the stakes more clearly. By midday they had harvested a substantial amount. Eleanor's suggestions for storage, separating varieties to prevent spoilage, hanging root bundles rather than piling them, were met with thoughtful consideration from Coda. Human and Sasquatch knowledge complemented each other, creating solutions neither might have devised alone. Smart thinking, Coda acknowledged, implementing her storage method. Human ways sometimes good. When Amma returned with her fungal harvest, she proudly showed Eleanor the careful way she'd separated different varieties. Eleanor praised the young cub's meticulous work, prompting a proud grin that revealed still-growing teeth. "I remember which ones you showed me," Amma said. "These for eating, these for medicine, these for father's special tea." "Very good, Amma," Eleanor replied, genuinely impressed. "You have an excellent memory." Later, as they sorted the day's gathering near the cave entrance, Tor returned empty-handed, frustration evident in his posture. "No rabbits," he reported tersely. "Traps empty. Found fox prints nearby. Took our catch." Coda rumbled thoughtfully. "Must move traps. Try West Ridge tomorrow." Eleanor hesitated before offering. "In human settlements they sometimes use different bait for winter trapping. Animals get desperate for certain foods when snow covers everything." 3 pairs of eyes turned to her expectantly. "Like what foods?" Amma asked. "Fats, mainly. Anything with oil or grease would be more tempting than berries or roots when it's cold." Coda considered this, then nodded. "Have bear fat stored. We'll try." As evening approached, a strange heaviness settled in the air. The weatherstone had deepened to indigo, its surface almost luminous in the fading light. Coda studied it with concern, then gestured everyone inside the cave. "First snow coming. Big snow." He secured the entrance, covering a thick, tanned hide that Eleanor had helped repair with sinew thread. The immediate temperature difference was noticeable, the cave remaining considerably warmer than the outside air. That night, as winds began to moan through the forest canopy, Eleanor experienced a moment of panic. The finality of the seasonal change struck her fully. She was committed now. Until spring thaw, returning to the human world would be nearly impossible, even if she wanted to. "Afraid?" Coda asked quietly, noticing her expression as he stoked the small fire. "A little," she admitted. "This is really happening. Still can go," he offered unexpectedly. "Tomorrow, before heavy snow, can guide you to forest edge." The offer surprised her. Eleanor glanced at the cubs, now sleeping peacefully in their corner nest. Amma had insisted on placing her sleeping furs closer to Eleanor's each night. Even Tor had gradually shown small gestures of acceptance. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, silent and transformative. "No," she decided, her voice gaining certainty. "I'm staying." The first heavy snow had come and gone, leaving the forest transformed into a crystalline wonderland. Though beautiful, the snow's depth made foraging increasingly difficult. 2 weeks after the initial snowfall, with their stores still substantial but not infinite, Coda decided they needed to check his more distant traps. "Not good to go alone now," he explained as they prepared for the expedition. "Snow hides dangers. Need more eyes." "Eleanor," Coda, and Tor would make the journey together, while Amma remained safely in the cave with strict instructions not to venture outside. The younger cub protested, but ultimately acquiesced when given the important responsibility of tending the fire and organizing their medicinal stores. Before departing, Coda carefully masked their trail with a specially designed branch, one of many techniques he'd shown Eleanor to hide their existence from human eyes. Even after weeks together, his caution regarding humans remained pronounced. Their journey took them deeper into the forest than Eleanor had yet ventured. Despite the snow's hampering effect, Coda and Tor moved with practiced ease, occasionally steadying Eleanor when she struggled through deeper drift. The silent winter forest held its own majesty, sunlight glinting off icicle-draped branches, the occasional flutter of a cardinal's wings providing rare splashes of color. They had checked 3 empty traps when they heard it, a sharp crack that echoed through the stillness. Not a natural sound, not a branch breaking under snow weight. Coda froze, raising his hand for absolute silence. His nostrils flared as he scented the air, then he gestured urgently for them to crouch. "Humans," he whispered, the word itself seeming to carry danger. "Hunters." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "How many?" Coda closed his eyes briefly, concentrating. 2. Maybe 3, with thunder sticks. "Guns," Eleanor translated, her stomach tightening. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Coda signaled them to follow as he led them toward a dense thicket of evergreens. Moving with remarkable stealth for his size, he created a sheltered observation point from which they could watch without being seen. Minutes passed in tense silence before 2 figures emerged from the tree line across the small clearing. Men in bright orange vests, rifles slung over their shoulders, their voices carrying in the winter air. "Told you I saw tracks here, Bill. Too big for deer, too defined for bear. Probably just some moose passing through. In these parts, unlikely. And look at that pattern, almost like a barefoot human, but huge." Eleanor felt Coda stiffen beside her. She glanced at his feet, understanding immediately. The hunters had found their tracks, not from today, but perhaps from earlier expeditions. "My grandfather swore he saw something out here back in '83. The first hunter continued, "Called it Sasquatch. Everyone laughed at him, but he never backed down from the story." His companion snorted. "Your grandfather also claimed he was abducted by aliens. Not exactly a reliable source. Well, something made these tracks. And if it's what I think it is, we'd be famous." Tor shifted slightly, dislodging a clump of snow that fell with a soft plop. The hunters instantly raised their rifles, scanning the tree line. "What was that?" the second man demanded. "Probably just snow falling." "Maybe." He didn't lower his weapon. "But let's check it out." As the hunters moved toward their hiding place, Amma suddenly burst from the underbrush to their left, scrambling through the snow. Eleanor's heart nearly stopped. The cub must have followed them despite clear instructions to remain behind. "Look," shouted one hunter, swinging his rifle toward the movement. Without hesitation, Coda emerged from their hiding place, emitting a thunderous roar that shook icicles from nearby branches. The hunters stumbled backward in shock and fear, one firing wildly into the air before both turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush with panicked shouts. Coda immediately gathered Amma, checking her for injuries while rumbling stern admonishments. The cub trembled, wide-eyed and frightened by the hunters and her father's rare display of anger. Followed, "Sorry," she whimpered, "wanted to help." Tar emerged last, holding something he'd found in the snow, a gleaming brass shell casing from one of the hunters' rifles. He studied it with wary fascination. "We must go." Now Coda urged, already moving deeper into the forest, rather than back toward their cave. "Not safe to return yet. Hunters might bring others." As they traveled swiftly through the snowy forest, following a circuitous route that Eleanor struggled to track, she realized how precarious their existence truly was. A single human discovery could destroy everything. "Will they come back?" she asked. when they paused briefly to rest. Yes, Koda answered grimly. Human curiosity dangerous. Want to find, capture, prove. Not all humans are like that, Eleanor protested weakly. Koda's gaze was both wise and sad as it met hers. You different. Rare. Most humans see us, want to destroy mystery, make us known thing. Once known, he drew a finger across his throat in a universal gesture. Eleanor couldn't argue with his assessment. The hunter's excited speculation about fame told her everything. Tor continued to examine the shell casing, turning it in his fingers with troubled fascination. Dangerous, Koda warned, noticing his son's interest. Human things bring human troubles. As darkness approached, they took shelter in a secondary cave, smaller and less comfortable than their home, but equipped with basic emergency provisions. As Emma finally drifted to sleep against Eleanor's side, still occasionally hitching with silent sobs from her scare, Eleanor realized how completely her loyalties had shifted. Her fear now was not of the creatures she lived with, but for them. They remained in the secondary cave for 3 days, waiting for any signs of the hunters. Koda ventured out periodically to check their surroundings, each time returning with the same report. No human presence detected, but caution still necessary. The cramped quarters and limited supplies strained everyone's patience, particularly Tor's. On the morning of the 4th day, Koda finally deemed it safe to return home. They traveled by a complicated route, doubling back and crossing a partially frozen stream to obscure their trail. The journey took twice as long as necessary, but ensured no one followed. Upon reaching their cave, Eleanor immediately noticed something was wrong. Tor moved sluggishly, his normally keen eyes dulled, fur lacking its usual luster. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked as they settled back into their primary dwelling. The older cub shrugged off her concern. "Fine. Just tired." That night, however, Tor's condition deteriorated rapidly. He refused the evening meal and curled into himself, shivering despite the fire's warmth. When Eleanor placed a hand on his forehead, she found it alarmingly hot to the touch. "He's burning with fever," she told Koda, who hovered anxiously nearby. By midnight, angry red welts had appeared across Tor's chest and neck. The cub whimpered in discomfort, no longer able to maintain his stoic facade. Koda prepared a poultice of stored herbs, applying it to the rash while murmuring soothing words in their native language. Eleanor watched with growing concern as Tor failed to respond to his father's remedies. The cub's breathing grew increasingly labored, his movements restless and pained. "I've seen this before," she said suddenly, studying the distinctive rash pattern. "It looks like a severe reaction to something, maybe a plant he brushed against, or something he touched." Her mind raced through possibilities before settling on the most likely culprit. "The shell casing, was he still carrying it when we returned?" Koda nodded grimly. "Kept in hand pouch," said was studying. Eleanor recalled the brass gleam. Some people are extremely sensitive to metal alloys, especially brass or nickel. It can cause contact dermatitis, a serious skin reaction. She explained her theory to Koda, who listened intently. "Shell made him sick. How first, we need to make sure the casing is nowhere near him now," Eleanor instructed. "Then, if I'm right about this, there are specific plants that can help reduce the inflammation and fever." She described the plants needed. A particular moss that grew on north-facing rocks, and a type of winter-green berry she'd noticed during their foraging trips. "The problem is, they're both at the forest edge, near human paths. I'd have to go there to find them." Koda's expression darkened with conflict, concern for his son warring with the risk of venturing near human territory so soon after their encounter with hunters. "I'll be careful," Eleanor promised. "I know what to look for, and I can move more easily among humans if they appear. They won't recognize me as different." After a moment of deliberation, Koda nodded reluctantly. "Must go together. Too dangerous alone." They left Alma to tend to her brother, with strict instructions to keep him hydrated and cool with damp cloths. The younger cub's solemn acceptance of responsibility showed how much he had matured in recent weeks. The journey to the forest edge took nearly 2 hours in the snow-laden darkness. Eleanor navigated with newfound confidence, recognizing landmarks she would have missed entirely when she first arrived. Coda moved silently beside her, every sense alert for danger. They located the wintergreen berries first, their bright red standing out against the snow like drops of blood. The medicinal moss proved more challenging, requiring them to search several rocky outcroppings before finding an adequate supply. Dawn was breaking as they hurried back to the cave, their gathered remedies secured in a woven pouch. Twice they stopped abruptly at Coda's signal, waiting in perfect stillness as distant human voices passed by on hiking trails. Upon their return, they found Tor's condition unchanged, possibly worse. His fever burned hotter, and the rash had spread to his arms. Amar looked up with tear-filled eyes as they entered. "He keeps asking for mother," she whispered, in sleep talk. Eleanor immediately set to work, crushing the berries and moss together with a stone mortar. Coda provided. The resulting paste emitted a sharp, medicinal odor that filled the small cave. She added water and heated the mixture slightly, following half-remembered instructions from a wilderness survival course she'd taken years ago. "Help me sit him up," she instructed Coda, who gently lifted his son to a semi-reclined position. Eleanor carefully applied the paste to Tor's rash, then helped him drink a tea made from the remaining berries. The cub was barely conscious, his eyes flickering open only briefly as she tended to him. Throughout the day and into the next night, Eleanor maintained her vigil, reapplying the paste when needed and keeping cool cloths on Tor's forehead. She spoke softly as she worked, telling stories from her human life, her childhood in rural Minnesota, her grandmother's garden, simple tales that required no response but filled the worried silence. Sometime during the second night, Tor's fever finally broke. Eleanor awoke from a brief exhausted doze to find the cub watching her through clear, lucid eyes. "You helped me," he said quietly, his voice hoarse but stronger. "Yes," Eleanor replied simply. "That's what family does." Tor was silent for a long moment before his hand tentatively sought hers in the dimness. "Thank you." It was only 2 words, but in them Eleanor heard the first real acceptance from the cub, who had most resisted her presence. As his fingers curled trustingly around hers, she felt something within her shift and settle, a piece of herself she hadn't realized was still adrift. The next morning, Tor asked Eleanor to help him create something. With her guidance, they fashioned small figures from clay, gathered from the cave's deeper recesses, 4 distinct forms representing each member of their unlikely family. The weather stone turned a deep, foreboding purple, a color Eleanor had not seen before. Coda studied it with growing concern, his massive fingers tracing the stone's surface as if reading Braille. "Bad storm comes," he announced, his usual stoic demeanor betraying subtle tension. "Very bad. Must prepare." The family sprang into action with practiced efficiency. Tor, fully recovered from his illness, gathered additional firewood and stored it in the driest corner of the cave. Amar checked their water supply, filling extra containers from the small spring that bubbled in the cave's deepest recess. Coda reinforced the hide covering at their entrance, adding a second layer of protection against the coming tempest. Eleanor helped where she could, but found herself studying the others, noting how their bodies instinctively knew the rhythm of winter survival, how even the cubs understood the seriousness of proper preparation. Her own contributions felt fumbling by comparison. "What can I do that's actually helpful?" she asked Coda, frustrated by her limitations. He regarded her thoughtfully. "No different things. Different useful." He gestured to the small central area. "Prepare inside space. Many days inside coming. Need comfort." Understanding dawned as Eleanor realized what he meant. Physical survival was only part of the challenge. The psychological burden of confinement during a prolonged storm could be equally dangerous. This was where her human perspective might offer value. By late afternoon, dark clouds had engulfed the sky. Wind moaned through the trees with increasing ferocity, and the first heavy snowflakes began to fall. Coda made one final check outside before sealing their entrance for the duration of the storm. "Now we wait," he said simply, settling beside the fire. The storm's first night passed uneventfully. Eleanor introduced the family to word games and riddles she remembered from childhood car trips. Amada proved surprisingly adept at riddles, her mind making creative connections that often left Eleanor laughing in delight. By the second day, however, the storm's true power had revealed itself. Wind shrieked around their shelter, occasionally forcing fine snow through tiny gaps in their entrance covering. The temperature dropped precipitously, requiring them to huddle closer to the carefully rationed fire. "Is it always this bad?" Eleanor asked, pulling a fur tighter around her shoulders. "Sometimes worse," Tor replied, his expression solemn. "Your mother died. Storm lasted 7 days. This sounds similar." Coda shot his son a warning glance, but the words had already affected them all. The spectre of that previous deadly storm hung in the air, unspoken but present. As if sensing the darkening mood, Ama moved to Eleanor's side. "Tell us a human story, please. One we haven't heard." Eleanor gathered her thoughts, searching for something appropriate. "Have I told you about the ancient Greek myth of Persephone? It's a story about why we have winter." The cubs shook their heads, settling expectantly as Eleanor began the tale of the goddess of spring, her abduction to the underworld, and her eventual compromise that created the seasons. She embellished the story with vivid descriptions of Mount Olympus and the underworld, watching the cubs' eyes widen with imagination. When she finished, Tor asked thoughtfully, "Do humans really believe gods make seasons?" "Not anymore," Eleanor explained. "Now we understand it's because of how the earth tilts as it circles the sun. But people still tell the old stories because they help us find meaning in natural patterns." "We have stories too," Amma offered eagerly, "about first people and great beasts and why moon changes shape." "I'd love to hear them," Eleanor encouraged. What followed was a cultural exchange that lasted well into the night. Coda shared traditional stories of his people, tales of ancient times when Sasquatch and other forest beings communicated freely, of great migrations following changing climates, of wisdom passed through generations about living in harmony with the natural world. The third day brought the storm's peak. A tremendous crack shook the forest, as lightning, rare in winter storms, struck somewhere nearby. Minutes later they heard the thunderous fall of a massive tree. The cubs huddled together, frightened by the unusual violence of the elements. Eleanor remembered childhood techniques for calming fears. "Let's make shadow puppets," she suggested, positioning her hands between the fire and cave wall. She created a rabbit and a bird, moving them in playful patterns across the stone surface. Ama quickly joined in, her dexterous fingers creating surprisingly complex shapes. Even Tor participated, his initial reluctance giving way to creative engagement as they developed an impromptu shadow play about forest animals preparing for winter. As the storm raged into its 4th night, sleep became difficult. The constant howling of wind, coupled with the occasional alarming crack of breaking branches outside, kept them all on edge. During a particularly loud gust, Coda moved to check the entrance covering, his face illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning through the small ventilation gaps. In that moment of clarity, Eleanor saw something she had never witnessed before, fear in the Sasquatch's eyes. Later, as the cubs finally succumbed to exhaustion, Coda settled beside Eleanor at the fire. For a long while, neither spoke, the storm's fury providing background to their shared vigilance. "Are troubles you?" Eleanor finally asked. Coda sighed, a deep rumbling sound. "Failed them once," Storm took mate. "Cannot fail again." "You won't," she assured him. "They have both of us now." He turned to study her face, searching for something. "When storm ends, we'll still have both." The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "Humans return to humans, natural, expected." His eyes reflected the firelight. "Cubs grow attached, Tor finally accepts. If leave after storm, He left the sentence unfinished. Eleanor realized he was voicing his deepest fear, not of the storm itself, but of returning to sole responsibility once it passed, of losing the fragile family balance they had created. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, surprised by how true the words felt. "This is my home now." The admission hung between them, weighty with implication. Coda nodded once, then retrieved something from beside his sleeping area, a branch from the lightning-struck tree he'd collected before the storm intensified. "For remembering," he explained, beginning to carve intricate patterns into its surface with a stone tool. Storm that changed paths, made family stronger. The storm's fury eventually subsided, leaving the forest transformed beneath a pristine blanket of snow nearly 4 feet deep in places. Emerging from their cave after 6 days of confinement felt like stepping into another world, one of crystalline beauty and profound silence. "Must check territory boundaries," Coda announced after their first meal in sunlight. "Storm changes things, creates new dangers, new opportunities." The family prepared for the expedition with practiced efficiency. Though the snow's depth would make travel difficult, all were eager to escape the cave's confines after nearly a week inside. They would follow the ridgeline where snow would be thinner, checking Coda's traps and assessing storm damage along the way. Eleanor had grown considerably more adept at winter forest navigation, but still marveled at how the others moved through deep snow with such natural grace. Emma bounded ahead, occasionally disappearing entirely into a drift before emerging with a joyful shake, while Tor studied tracks and markings with increasing seriousness, his interest in forest lore deepening since his recovery. "Look, Eleanor," Emma called, pointing skyward. "Eagle returns." Sure enough, a majestic bald eagle soared above the tree line, its distinctive silhouette stark against the blue sky. Coda nodded approvingly at the sighting. Good sign. Balance returns after storm. As they approached a stream crossing, now frozen solid enough to traverse, Eleanor noticed something glinting in the snow near her feet. She knelt to investigate, brushing away the powdery surface to reveal a small silver locket, her locket which she'd worn since her grandmother's passing years ago. The chain had broken weeks earlier, and she'd tucked it into a small pocket of her jacket for safekeeping. "I thought I'd lost this for good," she murmured, surprised to find it here far from the cave. Coda approached, his expression concerned as he recognized the item. "Human thing. Yes. It must have fallen when we were tracking last month," she explained, showing him the tiny hinged oval containing a faded photograph of her grandmother. "It's the only picture I have left of her." She tucked the locket carefully into an inner pocket, missing the troubled look that passed between Coda and Tor. They continued their journey, checking traps that had remained mostly empty during the storm. At midday, they reached the western boundary of their territory, a natural ridge, overlooking a valley that eventually led to human settlements. Coda typically avoided this area, but the need to assess storm damage overrode his usual caution. As they crested the ridge, voices carried on the clear winter air. Eleanor instinctively dropped to a crouch, the others following suit with silent precision. Through a screen of evergreens, they observed 3 humans in Forest Service uniforms, carefully making their way along a trail below, stopping periodically to mark damaged trees and check trail conditions. "Rangers," Eleanor whispered, recognizing the uniform patches. "They're checking the park after the storm." They remained motionless, watching as the rangers worked. Then something in the humans' conversation caught Eleanor's attention, found near Thompson Creek. Definitely looked like a woman, could be connected to that missing hiker case from last fall. The Jensen woman. "I thought they closed that file." Technically, but now with this locket turning up, Eleanor froze. They were discussing her locket, a duplicate of the one she'd just found, or perhaps the very same one, discovered before she'd located it and then dropped again in the ranger's search process. "They're reopening search," Coda murmured, his voice barely audible. "For you." The realization sent a chill through Eleanor that had nothing to do with the winter air. After months, the human world had presumed her dead, a tragedy briefly noted, then forgotten, as life moved on. Now a simple lost trinket threatened to renew human interest in her disappearance. The rangers continued their conversation, discussing search patterns and theories about the Jensen case. One mentioned bringing in tracker dogs once the snow level reduced enough for effective scent work. "We need to go," Tor urged quietly. "Not safe here." Coda nodded, and they retreated with careful, trackless movement, using techniques Eleanor had learned for leaving minimal traces in snow. As they made their way home by an indirect route, tension radiated from Coda in palpable ways. That evening, as the cubs slept, Coda voiced the concern that had clearly troubled him throughout their return journey. "Humans not give up easily when they start searching," he observed, turning Eleanor's locket over in his large palm. "This small thing brings big danger." "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, the weight of responsibility heavy in her chest. "I never thought—" "Not your fault," he assured her, "but must decide now. Human things connect to human world. Human world wants answers. What should we do?" she asked. "Two paths," Coda replied, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Leave territory, travel far, find new home. Or," he hesitated, "or what? You return, briefly, tell humans you are well, remove reason for searching." The suggestion caught Eleanor off guard. "You'd want me to go back?" "Not want," Coda corrected firmly. "But safety of family comes first, always." Eleanor considered the impossible choice before her. Abandoning their established home with winter still gripping the forest would bring tremendous hardship. Yet returning to the human world, even temporarily, carried its own dangers, both to herself and potentially to the secret of the Sasquatch's existence. "What if I don't come back?" she asked softly, giving voice to the fear that hovered unspoken between them. Coda's massive hand gently closed around the locket, then extended it toward her. "Must trust, as we trusted you." Eleanor took the locket, its familiar weight now laden with new significance. Inside, her grandmother's faded smile seemed to offer wisdom from beyond, a reminder of the human connections she'd once valued and the new bonds she'd forged since. "I need time to think," she said finally. Coda nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Not much time to give. Snow melts, humans come." Eleanor woke to the distant thrum of helicopter rotors, echoing through the forest. She'd heard the sound twice already, in the 3 days since their discovery of the rangers' renewed search effort. Each time, Coda had insisted they remain deep within the cave. No fire lit, no movement outside until the mechanical intrusion passed. Today, however, the sound persisted, hovering in one area rather than passing overhead. Through the cave's small air vents, Eleanor could hear the rhythm change as the helicopter circled, likely establishing a search grid. "They're getting closer," Tor observed, his young face solemn beyond his years. "Using machines to find you." Coda returned from a brief reconnaissance at the cave entrance, his expression confirming their fears. "Many humans now, with dogs, with machines that see heat." He gestured to indicate thermal imaging. "Not safe here soon." The reality they'd been avoiding could no longer be postponed. Eleanor knew a decision was required. Not tomorrow, not later today, but now. "We could try to wait them out," she suggested, though without conviction. Coda shook his massive head. "Winter ending soon, snow melting, tracks easier to find. Humans persistent when hunting." The word choice wasn't accidental. They were being hunted, even if the searchers believed their mission was rescue. "If we travel deeper into the mountains," Eleanor tried. "Cubs too young for hard journey through deep snow," Coda countered. "And humans follow, always follow." Eleanor gazed at the family she'd come to love. Amar pressed against her side, sensing the gravity of their discussion, even without fully understanding its implications. Tora stood near his father, trying to emulate Coda's stoic demeanor, but betraying his anxiety in the nervous movement of his fingers. This was her family now, as real and precious as any bound by blood. "I could go back," she said finally, the words painful to speak aloud, just long enough to stop the search. Tell them I'm fine and chose to disappear. Once they're satisfied, they'll leave the forest. And then, Coda asked, his amber eyes holding hers steadily. And then I come home, Eleanor answered without hesitation. Back here. To all of you. Humans might not let you return, Tor pointed out. Might ask many questions. Where were you? How did you survive winter? What did you see in forest? The cub's concerns echoed her own. The human world operated by different rules. Questions required answers. Anomalies demanded explanation. Missing persons needed to be officially found, or officially dead. The clean simplicity of forest life, where survival and family were the only true concerns, had no place in human bureaucracy. I need to try, Eleanor insisted. It's our best chance. Coda studied her face for a long moment before reaching a decision. From a small pouch at his waist, he withdrew something he'd been carving in private moments. A polished wooden token bearing symbols similar to those marking the forest trails, but with a unique pattern she hadn't seen before. Family mark, he explained, pressing the token into her palm. Shows you belong to clan, to us. The gesture's significance brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Sasquatch, tradition was being extended to her, not as a guest or temporary ally, but as a true family member. I'll come back, she promised, closing her fingers around the token. Whatever it takes. They formulated a plan quickly, necessity overriding emotion. Eleanor would travel to the forest edge near the ranger station. Their story would be simple. She had chosen to live as a hermit, after personal trauma, survived the winter in a self-made shelter, and now wished to formally end the search while maintaining her privacy. No mention of Sasquatch, no hints of her true living situation. Once the search was called off, she would return by a circuitous route to a rendezvous point they established. As she prepared to leave, gathering the few human possessions she'd retained, Amma approached with solemn determination. The young cub pressed something into Eleanor's hand, a small woven bracelet of plant fibers and fur. To remember, Amma explained, her large eyes glistening. To find way back. Tor, not to be outdone, offered a small pouch of medicinal herbs. For journey, he muttered gruffly, though his expression betrayed deeper concern than his words suggested. The weight of their gifts, the token, the bracelet, the herbs, anchored Eleanor to this new life more surely than any human possession ever had. These weren't mere objects, but physical manifestations of belonging, of being claimed by others who valued her presence. The family accompanied Eleanor partway through the forest, stopping at the boundary beyond which Coda deemed it too dangerous to proceed. The helicopter sounds had faded, but smoke from the Rangers' base camp was visible in the valley below. Remember route back, Coda instructed, pointing out the landmarks for their rendezvous. 3 days. We'll wait. 3 days, Eleanor repeated, committing the time frame to memory. When the moment of parting came, words seemed inadequate. Amma launched herself into Eleanor's arms, clinging fiercely until Coda gently separated them. Tor, maintaining his adolescent dignity, offered a formal nod that broke into a brief, tight hug at the last moment. Finally, Coda stood before her, his massive form blocking the light filtering through the trees. He placed one huge hand on her shoulder, the gesture conveying everything neither of them could articulate. 3 days, he reminded her. Then home. Eleanor nodded, her throat too tight for speech. Home. Not the human world she was returning to, but this wild place with these extraordinary beings who had saved her in more ways than one. With a final glance at her family, Eleanor turned and began the journey back toward humanity, the carved token pressed firmly against her heart. Eleanor crouched in the underbrush, watching the Rangers' base camp from a safe distance. For hours, she'd observed their operations, the coordinated search parties, the German shepherds straining at their leashes, the helicopter making periodic sweeps over the forest. The scale of the effort surprised her. All this for one missing woman presumed dead months ago. Her plan to approach the Rangers directly now seemed naive. Questions would be inevitable. where she'd been, how she'd survived the winter, why she hadn't sought help. Answers would lead to more questions, investigations, perhaps even psychological evaluations. The simple story she'd rehearsed with Coda suddenly felt flimsy against the machinery of human concern. As dusk approached, Eleanor retreated deeper into the forest. The 3-day window Coda had given her still had 48 hours remaining, but her instincts told her the situation had changed. The token pressed against her chest beneath her clothing, a reminder of where she truly belonged. By nightfall, she'd returned to their arranged meeting place, surprised to find Coda already waiting, his massive form almost invisible against the darkness. "Not safe," he stated simply, reading the situation in her expression. "Too many humans." Eleanor nodded. "They're using tracking dogs, heat sensors, and coordinated search grids. If I approach them, I don't think they'd just let me walk away. Must leave territory," Coda decided, his deep voice resolute. "Too dangerous now. Leave? Where would we go?" Coda gestured toward the distant mountains, visible through a break in the trees. Old territories, deep places, where ancient ones lived before humans came with machines and noise. The prospect was daunting, traveling with 2 cubs through late winter terrain to an unknown destination, but Eleanor understood the necessity. Their current home was compromised. "When do we leave?" "Tonight," Coda replied, "while stars guide path." They returned to the cave together, where Tor and Arma had already begun preparations under their father's earlier instructions. Essential supplies were bundled in hide pouches, dried food, medicinal herbs, fire-making tools, and the few personal items each considered irreplaceable. "Travel light, travel fast," Coda instructed as they prepared. "Long journey, hard journey." Eleanor helped Arma secure her small bundle, noting how the younger cub attempted to maintain a brave face despite her obvious anxiety. "Will we find another good cave?" Arma asked softly. "An even better one," Eleanor promised, though she had no way of knowing if this was true. As full darkness settled, they departed their cave home, Coda carefully concealing the entrance behind them to hide evidence of their habitation. The night sky spread above them in crystalline clarity, stars glittering with cold brilliance against the void. Coda paused briefly, orienting himself by the constellations. From a pouch at his waist, he withdrew a piece of tanned deerskin marked with dots and lines. A star map, Eleanor realized, showing celestial patterns and their corresponding landmarks on Earth. "Follow Great Bear," he explained, pointing to what humans called the Big Dipper. "Leads to high valley beyond 3 peaks. Safe place." They traveled in silence, moving primarily at night when the snow's crust had hardened enough to support their weight without leaving obvious tracks. During daylight hours they rested in temporary shelters, dense thickets or shallow caves, always alert for signs of human intrusion. The journey proved more arduous than Eleanor had anticipated. Even with her improved wilderness skills, she struggled with the demanding terrain and pace. Often she found herself leaning on Coda's offered arm during particularly difficult passages, his strength a steady anchor in the challenging landscape. Tor surprised her most, taking increasing responsibility during their trek. He scouted ahead for potential dangers, found suitable shelter spots, and once memorably caught a rabbit with his bare hands when their supplies ran low. The adventure seemed to accelerate his maturation, transforming him from reluctant child to capable young hunter before her eyes. On their 3rd night of travel, they reached a high ridge that offered a sweeping view of the forest behind them. In the far distance, pinpricks of light marked the rangers' camp, now miles away. Overhead, stars formed patterns that Eleanor was learning to read through Coda's patient instruction, not just for navigation, but for their stories and meanings in Sasquatch culture. "Great Mother," Coda said, pointing to a cluster Eleanor recognized as the Pleiades, "watches over all forest children." "And that one?" Eleanor asked, indicating another bright formation. "The hunter," Tor supplied before his father could answer. "Protects territory boundaries." As they continued their journey, crossing streams swollen with spring melt and navigating dense pine forests untouched by human presence, Eleanor found herself reflecting on the strangeness of her path. 6 months earlier, she had been homeless, purposeless, adrift in the human world that now pursued her. The irony wasn't lost on her. Only in leaving humanity behind had she found her true home. On the 5th day, they encountered their first significant obstacle, a ravine too wide to cross directly with no obvious passage around it. Coda studied the problem with characteristic patience, finally discovering a fallen tree partially bridging the gap downstream. Crossing required nerve and balance. The log was slippery with moss and rotting in places. Coda went first, testing each section before allowing the others to follow. Tor crossed confidently, May with trepidation but determination. When Eleanor's turn came, she moved cautiously, focusing on each step rather than the dizzying drop below. Midway across, a section of bark gave way beneath her foot. Eleanor felt first falling, a cry escaping her lips, then Coda's powerful hand closed around her wrist, stabilizing her until she regained her footing. "Thank you," she gasped once safely across. Coda nodded simply. Family catches family when falling. The statement, without drama or embellishment, crystallized something Eleanor had been feeling throughout their journey. This wasn't merely cooperation for survival, it was the profound, instinctive support system of true family. The realization brought both comfort and a fierce protectiveness she'd never experienced before. As they continued toward the distant peaks, Eleanor realized she'd never felt more certain of her place in the world, despite having never been farther from the society that had once defined her. After 8 days of arduous travel, the family crested a final ridge to discover a sheltered valley nestled between 3 mountain peaks. The landscape below offered a promising blend of dense forest, meadows now emerging from snow cover, and the silver thread of a stream winding through the center. "Old territory," Coda announced with evident satisfaction. "Ancestors lived here many generations." Eleanor scanned the pristine valley, wondering how long it had been since human feet had trodden this remote sanctuary. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the vista's magnificence momentarily overshadowing their exhaustion. They descended carefully, finding game trails that eased their path. Tor spotted deer tracks, promising future hunting opportunities, while Amma excitedly identified berry bushes that would yield fruit in the warmer months ahead. By late afternoon, they reached the valley floor. Coda led them to a rocky outcropping where several cave openings punctuated the stone face, partially concealed by vegetation. He examined each one systematically, rejecting 2 before approving a third. "Good airflow. Dry. Defensible," he explained, investigating the interior. "Will serve until fine data." The cave proved smaller than their previous home, but adequate for temporary shelter. As they settled in, Eleanor noted subtle differences in Coda's behavior, increased vigilance, frequent pausing to scent the air or examine ground markings invisible to her eyes. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked, as they gathered kindling for their first fire. Coda hesitated before answering. "Not wrong. Different." He gestured broadly toward the surrounding forest. "Not alone in valley. Humans." Eleanor ached, immediately concerned. "No. Others, like us." He tapped his chest. "Other Canlan." The revelation stunned her. "There are more of your kind here. Another family. Not family. Clan. Many families together." Coda's expression conveyed complex emotions, relief at finding others of his kind mingled with uncertainty about their reception. Tor and Amma reacted to this news with unbridled excitement, bombarding their father with questions. How many cubs would there be? Did the other clan have the same customs? Would they be welcomed or challenged? "Other cubs," Amma exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Friends to play with." Tor attempted to maintain a more dignified interest, but couldn't conceal his eager anticipation. "Will they teach us their hunting methods?" he asked. trying to frame his excitement in practical terms. Coda answered their questions patiently, explaining that while different clans shared fundamental traditions and language, each developed unique customs adapted to their specific territory. Must approach respectfully, he cautioned. Follow visitor protocols. That evening, as the cubs finally slept after their long journey, Coda shared more details with Eleanor about Sasquatch clan structures. She learned that clans typically consisted of 3 to 5 family units, each maintaining separate dwellings but gathering regularly for social activities, knowledge sharing and ceremonial occasions. Leadership earned by wisdom, not strength, he explained. Elders guide, not command. Eleanor absorbed this information with growing fascination, realizing how little she truly knew about Sasquatch society despite months living with Coda's family. "Will they accept me?" she asked, finally, voicing the concern that had been growing since learning of the other clan's existence. Coda considered this question carefully. Unknown. Rare for human to know of us. Rarer still to live among us. He touched the family token she wore. "But you carry clan mark now. Belong to family. Must be respected." His words offered reassurance, but Eleanor sensed the underlying uncertainty. Her presence would complicate their introduction to the established clan, perhaps even endanger their acceptance. At dawn, Coda discovered fresh evidence of the other clan's stone tools left near the stream, including an ancient hammerstone of remarkable craftsmanship. He examined it with reverence, explaining that such tools were passed through generations, their creation techniques refined over thousands of years. "Very old," he remarked, returning the stone to its place out of respect for its owner. "Made before human metal came to forests." Following clan protocol, Coda left a sign of their presence, a specific arrangement of branches that Eleanor learned indicated peaceful intent from visitors of the same kind. Then they waited. The response came sooner than expected. By mid-afternoon, subtle rustling in the surrounding forest announced approaching observers. Coda positioned his family in the clearing before their temporary cave, instructing them to remain calm and make no sudden movements. "They watch first," he explained quietly. "Judge intentions." Eleanor fought her instinct to scan the trees, instead following Coda's example of relaxed attentiveness. The cubs, despite their excitement, maintained impressive discipline, though armor occasionally squeezed Eleanor's hand in barely contained anticipation. Finally, a deep vocalizing call echoed across the clearing, a greeting and challenge combined. Coda responded with a similar call, adding specific tonal variations that Eleanor recognized as identifying his lineage and reason for entering the territory. Gradually, figures emerged from the forest edge, first a massive elder with silver-streaked fur, then others of varying ages. Eleanor counted 8 adults and several cubs, their expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to open suspicion as they noticed her among the family. The elder approached Coda, and the two engaged in a formal exchange of vocalizations and gestures that seemed part language, part ritual. Eleanor remained absolutely still, acutely aware of being studied by multiple pairs of intelligent, evaluating eyes. The tension broke unexpectedly when a young cub from the clan, overcome with curiosity, darted forward to examine armor and Tor. The adults called sharply for the youngster to return, but the momentary breach of protocol triggered Arma's equally enthusiastic response. Within moments, the cubs were cautiously circling each other, while the adults maintained their more formal interaction. Only when the elder finally turned his attention fully toward Eleanor did she feel the full weight of her anomalous presence. He approached slowly, studying her with ancient eyes that reflected generations of wisdom and weariness toward humans. Coda spoke then, explaining in their language with occasional English words for Eleanor's benefit. He recounted finding her in the forest, her integration into their family, and her choice to remain with them, despite opportunities to return to human society. Throughout this narrative, The elder's gaze never left Eleanor's face, as though searching for truth beyond Coda's words. When Coda finished, a heavy silence fell over the gathering. Eleanor understood that a crucial moment had arrived. Slowly, respectfully, she removed the clan token from beneath her clothing and held it out on her open palm, not offering it, simply showing that she carried the family mark legitimate. The elder studied the token, then met her eyes with an evaluating stare that seemed to penetrate beyond surface appearance. What he searched for, Eleanor couldn't know, but she returned his gaze steadily, without fear or challenge. Finally he made a sound, not quite acceptance, not quite rejection, and turned back to Coda. More words were exchanged, too rapid and complex for Eleanor to follow, before the elder gestured toward the larger clan's territory. "We may stay," Coda translated, relief evident in his voice. "Provisionally, must prove worth to clan." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a beginning, a chance Eleanor had not dared to hope for. The clan settlement exceeded Eleanor's expectations. Nestled within a protected valley surrounded by ancient evergreens, it consisted of several cave dwellings supplemented by ingeniously constructed shelters using fallen logs and branches. At the center burned a communal fire pit, larger than she'd seen before, with smooth stones arranged in a circle for seating. The elder, whose name translated roughly as Stone Singer, had assigned Coda's family a peripheral cave slightly removed from the main settlement. The location reflected their status, neither rejected nor fully integrated, but placed where they could be observed while proving their worth to the community. Amma adapted with characteristic enthusiasm, quickly befriending several cubs her age, despite language differences between the clans. Tor maintained more reserve, but found common ground with the older youngsters through hunting skills and forest knowledge. For Eleanor, acceptance came more gradually. Female clan members watched her warily, particularly when she interacted with the cubs. She understood their caution. A human among them represented generations of warnings and bitter experience. "Be patient," Coda advised as they gathered spring roots together. "Trust built slowly, like forest after fire." Eleanor nodded, concentrating on demonstrating her usefulness rather than forcing connections. She contributed human knowledge where helpful, showing how to create more efficient storage containers, introducing new preservation techniques for meat and berries, teaching methods for treating fever that complemented their traditional remedies. 2 weeks after their arrival, an opportunity arose when one of the clan's elders developed a painful tooth abscess. Eleanor recognized the symptoms from her wilderness first aid training and offered a poultice of specific herbs she'd learned about both from Coda and her own past. The treatment provided noticeable relief, earning grudging acknowledgement from the clan's healer. The true turning point came unexpectedly during a spring gathering feast. The clan had assembled around the communal fire pit, sharing the bounty of early spring, tender shoots, roots, and the first successful hunt of the season. Eleanor sat slightly apart with Coda's family, respectful of the established social boundaries. As the meal concluded, one of the female elders began a traditional story song, her deep, melodic voice rising and falling in patterns that needed no translation to convey their emotional resonance. Others joined in at specific points, creating harmonies that echoed hauntingly through the valley. When the song ended, a thoughtful silence settled over the gathering. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, Stone Singer gestured toward her. "Human knows songs?" he asked in the simplified language they'd developed for communication. Eleanor hesitated, uncertain of the appropriate response. Coda nodded encouragingly. "Yes," she replied carefully. "Different songs, but songs." "Share with clan," Stone Singer invited, or perhaps commanded, gesturing toward the central position by the fire. Heart pounding, Eleanor moved to the indicated place. All eyes turned expectantly toward her, some curious, others still wary or challenging. This moment, she realized, held significance beyond mere entertainment. It was a test of cultural exchange, of her willingness to reciprocate their reluctant welcome. She chose a folk ballad her grandmother had taught her, a simple melody about changing seasons and enduring connection to the land. Her voice, untrained but clear, carried the ancient human tune into the night air. As she sang, she noticed the clan members listening intently, some with heads tilted in the same gesture of consideration she'd observed in Coda when encountering something new. When she finished, silence held for several heartbeats before Stonesinger nodded once, a subtle but clear gesture of approval. From that evening forward, Eleanor found small but meaningful shifts in her reception. Females began including her in gathering expeditions. Cubs approached her with fewer restraints. Questions came more freely, genuine curiosity gradually replacing suspicion. As spring advanced toward summer, Coda's family transitioned from visitors to community members. Their peripheral dwelling remained the same, but their integration into daily clan life deepened. Eleanor learned the intricate social structures governing Sasquatch society, the careful balancing of individual family needs against collective welfare, the sophisticated communication systems that extended beyond verbal language. The reverence for ancestral knowledge combined with practical adaptation to changing circumstances. Most fascinating was their relationship with the natural, a world, not the romanticized harmony humans often projected onto indigenous peoples, but a complex, pragmatic interdependence based on generations of observation and experience. They took what they needed, managed resources to ensure renewal, and maintained traditions that honored their place within the ecosystem rather than above it. One evening, as Eleanor helped prepare hides for summer clothing, she found herself working alongside Mira, a female close to her own age who had shown particular resistance to her presence initially. "Why stay with forest people?" Mira asked abruptly, her English halting but determined. "Humans have many things. Big dwellings, easy food." The question caught Eleanor off guard with its directness. "Those things didn't make me happy," she answered honestly. "I was alone there, even surrounded by people." Mira considered this, her strong hands continuing to work the hide. "Not alone here." "No," Eleanor confirmed, surprised by the simplicity of this truth. "Not alone here." Mira nodded slowly, then offered Eleanor the better scraping stone she'd been using, a small gesture that spoke volumes about growing acceptance. That night, returning to their dwelling, Eleanor noticed Coda adding a new marking to the entrance, symbols that declared their permanent residence rather than temporary status. Inside, the cubs were arranging sleeping furs for the night around a small fire that illuminated the cave with golden light. Eleanor paused in the entrance, struck by the scene's profound ordinariness. This family preparing for night, secure in their belonging. Home wasn't the cave itself, nor even the clan settlement, but this connection that had transformed her from lost to found. Summer embraced the valley in verdant abundance. Berry patches yielded generous harvests, streams teemed with fish, and forest game provided ample hunting opportunities. The clan thrived in this seasonal plenty, gathering surplus for the winter months that would inevitably return. Eleanor had found her place among them, neither fully Sasquatch nor entirely human anymore, but occupying a unique position that bridged both worlds. The cubs, all of them, not just Coda's, sought her for stories of the human world, while the adults valued her different perspective on practical problems. On this particular morning, Eleanor accompanied a gathering party to a meadow rich with medicinal plants. Emma bounded ahead with her new friends, her once hesitant personality blossoming in the company of other cubs. Mira walked beside Eleanor, their initial wariness having transformed into a genuine friendship over the past months. "Good season," Mira observed, gesturing toward the abundant growth around them. "Many healing plants this year," Eleanor nodded, recognizing yarrow, echinacea, and other herbs she'd learned to identify and use. "The spring rains helped," she agreed, bending to gather a particularly fine specimen. A sharp whistle cut through the peaceful scene, the clan's alert signal. Instantly, the gathering party froze, then moved with practiced efficiency toward the forest edge. Another whistle followed, this one in a different pattern that Eleanor had learned meant human presence. From their sheltered position within the tree line, they observed what had triggered the alert. Below, in a clearing visible from their elevated vantage point, three figures moved with deliberate purpose, humans in scientific field gear, carrying backpacks and equipment Eleanor recognized as research technology. Wildlife biologists, she whispered to Mira, identifying the distinctive movement patterns of researchers rather than hunters or casual hikers. "They're tracking something." Stone Singer materialized silently beside them, his ancient eyes narrowed as he studied the intruders. "What seek they?" he asked Eleanor directly, acknowledging her unique ability to interpret human behavior. Eleanor watched the researchers carefully. They're setting up equipment, cameras, recording devices. Scientific study, not hunting. The distinction provided little comfort to the clan. Any human activity threatened their seclusion, regardless of intent. Stone Singer signaled for the gathering party to retreat deeper into clan territory, while he summoned a council meeting. By nightfall, the entire clan had assembled at the communal fire pit, voices hushed but urgent as they discussed this unwelcome development. Goda, now respected as a knowledgeable voice in clan decisions, explained what Eleanor had told him about scientific research. "Seek evidence," he translated for those with less understanding of human ways. "Proof of our existence. Not to harm directly, but knowledge of us brings more humans. Always more." Several members spoke, offering perspectives ranging from immediate migration to more aggressive deterrence. The debate continued until Stone Singer raised his hand for silence. "Eleanor," he addressed her directly, "what knowledge you have of these human searchers?" All eyes turned to her. Eleanor chose her words carefully, aware of the weight her assessment carried. "They're cryptozoologists, scientists who search for animals not yet proven to exist. They've likely heard rumors or found tracks. They'll set up cameras, collect hair and footprint samples, record sounds." She paused. "They're more persistent than hunters or hikers. If they suspect Sasquatch presence, they won't give up easily." Stone Singer considered this information, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "These machines they bring can see in darkness? From far away?" "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "Infrared cameras detect body heat. Recording devices can catch sounds from great distances. They might have DNA analysis equipment to test hair or other samples." A murmur of concern rippled through the gathering. One of the elders spoke up. "In my grandmother's time, humans came with similar seeking. Clan moved higher into mountains. Many died in harsh winter that followed. The specter of forced migration hung heavily over the council. Relocation with winter approaching would bring significant hardship, especially for the youngest and oldest clan members. Perhaps," Eleanor began hesitantly, then continued with more confidence as a plan formed, "I could help. I understand their methods, their technology. I could misdirect them." The suggestion created immediate controversy. Some objected to any interaction with the researchers, while others saw the strategic advantage in Eleanor's human knowledge. Coda remained silent during the debate, but his eyes never left Eleanor's face, recognizing the risk in what she proposed. Finally, Stone Singer raised his hand again. "Explain this misdirection." Eleanor outlined her idea, using her human appearance and knowledge to approach the researchers as a hiker, learn their specific goals and methods, then subtly steer them away from actual clan evidence. She could provide false leads, suggest more promising areas far from clan territory, perhaps even damage their equipment in ways that would appear accidental. Can be done without revealing connection to clan. Stone Singer asked, pinpointing the central concern. "Yes," Eleanor assured him. "I'll create a backstory they'll believe." Humans are quick to accept simple explanations. After further discussion, the council reached consensus. Eleanor would attempt her misdirection strategy, but with strict parameters. She would not reveal any clan knowledge, would maintain distance from clan territory during her interaction with the researchers, and would return immediately if the risk became too great. As the council dispersed, Coda finally approached Eleanor, his expression troubled. "Dangerous game," he said quietly. "These humans have machines, ways to know truth from lies." "I'm aware of the risks," she acknowledged, touching the clan token she still wore beneath her clothing. "But it's our best option besides abandoning the valley." Later that night, as Coda's family prepared for sleep in their dwelling, Eleanor noticed both cubs watching her with unusual intensity. "Will you go back to humans?" Emma asked directly, voicing the fear they all carried. Eleanor gathered the young cub close. "Just to speak with them, then I'll return home." "Do you?" Tor, nearly reaching Eleanor's shoulder now and increasingly serious as adolescence approached, asked the question his father had not. "What if humans recognize you? From search time?" The possibility had occurred to Eleanor as well. Her disappearance had generated enough interest for a substantial search operation. If any of these researchers had been involved or remembered news reports, low probability, she assured him, using his fondness for analytical thinking. "Many months have passed. My appearance has changed." This was undeniably true. Her once short hair now hung past her shoulders, sun and wind had weathered her skin, and lean muscle had replaced the softness of her former urban life. As the cubs finally settled into sleep, Coda approached Eleanor where she sat by their small fire. Without words, he placed something in her hands, a small, dark object she didn't immediately recognize. "Found where human researchers walked," he explained. "Dropped from pack." Eleanor examined the device, a chill of recognition settling over her. A high-tech tracking tag, likely intended for wildlife monitoring. The implications were clear. These weren't amateur Bigfoot enthusiasts, but serious researchers with sophisticated equipment. The stakes of her intervention had just increased dramatically. Dawn mist clung to the valley floor as Eleanor made her final preparations. She had washed in the stream, untangled her hair as best she could, and donned the tattered remnants of her original clothing, carefully preserved for this moment. The transformation was jarring, a deliberate step backward into her former self. Coda watched silently as she readied herself, his eyes reflecting complex emotions. "Remember plan," he finally said. 3 days. "No more. 3 days," she confirmed. "Just long enough to misdirect them, then I'll return by the North Ridge path." Tor approached, offering something he'd spent the previous evening creating, a woven bracelet of forest materials, interspersed with strands of his own fur and amas. "To remember family," he explained, his adolescent voice striving for maturity despite the emotion beneath. "To find way home." Eleanor allowed him to tie it around her wrist, then concealed it beneath the sleeve of her jacket. "I couldn't forget if I tried," she assured him. Amma's goodbye was less restrained, a fierce embrace and whispered pleas for quick return. Eleanor held the young cub tightly, inhaling the familiar woodland scent of her fur, memorizing the feeling of her small, strong body. "Watch, brother," she instructed Amma with mock seriousness. "Keep father from worry." Stone Singer arrived as the sun crested the eastern ridge, bearing the clan's formal blessing for her mission. He placed weathered hands on Eleanor's shoulders, speaking traditional words of protection before adding his own counsel. "Remember, you walk between worlds now, neither fully one nor other. Strength in this, also danger." The observation resonated deeply. Eleanor had indeed become something unique, shaped by both her human origins and Sasquatch adoption. This in-between state, once a source of uncertainty, now felt like her true identity. She departed as morning light filtered through the canopy, following game trails that would lead toward the researchers' camp. The clan's scouts had monitored their movements, reporting a base camp established near a mountain stream approximately 4 miles from clan territory. The journey through the forest felt strangely disorienting. For the first time in nearly a year, Eleanor moved as a human, walking upright on established paths rather than adapting to Sasquatch travel patterns, consciously making noise rather than practicing silent movement. deliberately breaking twigs and disturbing foliage to support her cover story of being a lost hiker. By mid-morning, she detected signs of human presence, boot prints in soft earth, survey flags marking a research perimeter, the faint scent of coffee and synthetic materials carried on the breeze. Eleanor paused, steeling herself for the coming performance. Every human interaction skill she'd once taken for granted now required conscious effort. She emerged into a small clearing where 3 researchers worked at portable equipment stations. Their startled expressions at her appearance confirmed the effectiveness of her disheveled, disoriented presentation. "Oh, thank God," she called out with practiced relief. "I've been lost for days." The researchers responded with immediate concern, offering water, food, and medical assessment while bombarding her with questions about her circumstances. Eleanor delivered her prepared narrative, a solo hiking trip gone wrong after losing her pack in a stream crossing, surviving on berries and stream water while trying to find her way back to civilization. Eleanor Jensen, she introduced herself, watching carefully for any sign of recognition. Relief washed through her when their expressions showed only compassion for her fabricated ordeal rather than connection to her past disappearance. Over the next 2 days, Eleanor maintained her role as grateful rescue while gathering critical intelligence. She learned the researchers were indeed conducting a formal Sasquatch investigation, funded by a private research foundation specializing in cryptozoology. Their equipment exceeded her expectations. Thermal imaging drones, environmental DNA collection kits, acoustic monitoring systems with advanced pattern recognition software. Most concerning was their methodical approach. These weren't weekend enthusiasts, but career scientists applying rigorous methodology. They had already collected promising samples, unusual hair caught on tree bark, partial footprints in muddy embankments, recordings of vocalizations unlike known wildlife. Eleanor implemented her misdirection strategy carefully. She accidentally disabled a drone while examining it with apparent curiosity. She suggested terrain features that would take their research focus away from clan territory. When they mentioned specific evidence, she provided plausible alternative explanations based on her wilderness survival experience. On her final evening in camp, the lead researcher, Dr. Michaels, offered Eleanor an unexpected proposition. "Your knowledge of this region is impressive, even if you did get lost," she observed. "We could use someone with your woodland skills on our team." Paid position, of course. The offer represented everything Eleanor had once valued: professional recognition, financial stability, human connection. For a brief, disorienting moment, she glimpsed the path not taken, returning to human society with purpose and community, rather than the isolation that had driven her into the forest initially. "It's tempting," Eleanor admitted, allowing herself to genuinely consider the possibility, if only to make her refusal more convincing. "But this experience has changed my perspective. Once I get back to town, I'm planning to head east, stay with my sister for a while." The lie came easily, but underneath it lay a profound truth. She had indeed been changed, not by being lost, but by being found by a family that transcended species boundaries. On the 3rd morning, as promised, the researchers guided Eleanor to a Forestry Service road where their research vehicle was parked. They offered to drive her to the nearest town, but she declined, citing her need for processing time before full re-entry to civilization. "Are you sure?" Dr. Michaels asked with genuine concern. "It's still a good 10 miles to town." "Positive," Eleanor assured her. "After what I've been through, a walk on an actual road feels like luxury." They provided her with water, energy bars, and a hand-drawn map before departing with final well wishes. Eleanor watched their vehicle disappear around a bend, waiting until the engine sound faded completely before slipping back into the forest. She shed her human performance like an uncomfortable garment, body instinctively returning to the movement patterns she'd learned from Coda, with each step away from the road and deeper into the wilderness. Tension drained from her shoulders, replaced by the certainty of returning home. As dusk approached, Eleanor reached the rendezvous point on the northern ridge. Coda waited as promised, his massive silhouette unmistakable against the evening sky. Without words, he enfolded her in an embrace that conveyed everything: relief, welcome, belonging. When they finally parted, Eleanor shared her findings about the researchers while they began the journey back to clan territory. Coda listened intently, asking occasional questions that demonstrated his strategic thinking. "They will return," he asked. "Eventually, but not soon," Eleanor assured him. "I convinced them this region was less promising than areas 50 miles east. They'll focus there for at least a season." As they crested the final ridge overlooking the valley, Eleanor paused, taking in the view of scattered firelight from the clan settlement below. In the gathering darkness, the cubs had organized a welcome ceremony, singing traditional songs that carried clearly through the evening air. "Strange path brought you to us," Coda observed quietly. Eleanor nodded, thinking of all the seeming misfortunes, job loss, homelessness, becoming lost in the forest that had led to this moment. "Sometimes getting lost is the only way to be found," she replied. Amma spotted them first, racing up the path with Tor close behind. As Eleanor knelt to receive their enthusiastic greeting, the woven bracelet Tor had given her caught the last rays of sunset. The intertwined human and Sasquatch materials gleaming gold in the fading light, a perfect symbol of her unique place between worlds.